We're pleased to have all the way from India a former star of the Ashes, actually. One of the only men who can claim to have won the Ashes in Australia that's still playing the game. Jimmy Anderson, actually, I suppose, could put in that claim as well, because he won the Ashes in 2010-11. But Chris, welcome to the World's Best Cricket Club. All the way from, I think you're in Raipur, is that right?
Yeah, in Raipur. Yeah, I've been here for about 3 weeks. Started off in Mumbai, and then where did we go? I can't remember. Then we were somewhere else last week, and then in Raipur this week. So yeah, it's been good fun playing in the Masters tournament against some of our old rivals: Australia, West Indies, South Africa, India. Yeah, quite hard work on the body, but it's been good fun nevertheless.
Looking at the scores, it's the same old story with England, isn't it? The same story as appeared in the Champions Trophy recently. Can't get quite enough runs. So you're blameless, basically, except that actually you've been the star with the bat. I reckon you're averaging, like 90 or something, because I think you've only been out once, haven't you?
I think so. I think batting is certainly a lot easier on some of these pitches than bowling. The bowlers have been getting a hiding. I mean, some of the scores have been 270, 260, 250, some Aussie scores. But yeah, we're probably just a little bit behind the eight ball, and I think our disadvantage as well is we're coming from the winter, so we weren't really able to sort of do many nets and things before, whereas some of the other nations have been in the nets for a couple of months before. So we're probably a little bit underprepared, and just our team is just sort of lacking a bit of match. I think practice really, but yeah, like I said, either way, it's still good fun to see some old teammates I've not seen for a long time, county teammates, international teammates. And yeah, I think with these things, especially the England team, we try not to take it too seriously. Try and put in a good fight, but we're sort of we're not quite up to the races with some of these other sides.
Well, I just don't know why you would, as a bowler, I don't know why you would sign up, aged whatever you are, to bowl at people like Chris Gale and Hashim Amla, and you had Kumar today, didn't you? Sangha today, who I see got 100 off about 40 balls or something. I mean, these guys, they just eat bowlers for breakfast. It's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea at the time, and I mean, to be fair, you're not going to get these opportunities very often to sort of come back in and play some cricket abroad and see some old teammates. So it is a great experience to do these things. I've done 2 or 3 of these tournaments, and I have enjoyed it. At the time when you are getting whacked over the ropes, sort of every other ball, it isn't much fun. But at the same time, someone like Sangakkara, Shane Watson, they're almost sort of as good as they were when they were playing at their best, really. So it is actually good to just watch them sort of still do what they can at age 30, 40, in their mid-40s, late 40s. It's pretty impressive that these guys can still do it. And also, it's a bit of a test to myself. I like to sort of keep myself fit. I don't play any cricket at all really anymore, but it's also just nice to see if you can still do it. The bowling is certainly, a little bit harder. I can still do it. But it's also nice to hit a few balls over the rope now and then. And, in front of big crowds. I mean, the India game we played a couple of weeks ago, I think there was 35,000 watching. So, that experience in itself was pretty crazy. It was almost sort of playing in a IPL sort of cauldron. So we'd obviously like to win in some games, but at the same time, it's not.
Your audio is breaking up a little bit, actually. It's funny, but I remember actually playing a game in India many years ago.
My Wi-Fi's a bit funny.
It's a bit patchy. Yeah, I remember playing a match a bit like yours, a sort of Legends game years ago in India. It was in Coimbatore, and like you said, about 40,000 people turned up, and it was an incredible atmosphere. And we played against some Indian legends, and we won. And the crowd, who were all absolutely loving it, kind of the entertainment, suddenly kind of took umbrage when India lost the game, an Indian 11, and they stormed the ground and stole all the Indian players' kit from as they were sort of makeshift dressing rooms made out of marquees, because it was not a regular use for cricket ground. And they just rushed in and stormed these marquees and took all their kit away. So, it can go wrong, obviously. They want the Indians to win, don't they? In a way. I mean, even though they want a bit of entertainment.
Yeah, they're just, that's it. They're so passionate about it. Even, at masters level, they do, the Indian side and the Sri Lanka side, they do take it very seriously compared to, the English team and probably the South African side in comparison. Um, but yeah, I think it was 4 years ago we actually played India. Kevin Peterson was in that side. And again, in a Masters tournament, I think there was actually 60,000 watching, and we actually managed to beat them. And the crowd were pretty quiet. And I think that's the only Masters game I've ever actually won, was against India in front of 60,000. So again, that was a great experience. But it's amazing how it can go from so loud to so quiet.
Are you a bit of a figure of intrigue for Indian people because of your sheer scale?
Yeah, I think I get more attention these days because I have bulked up quite a lot since retiring. Nearly 10 years ago now. Seems crazy. It's 10 years, but I'm probably about 4.5 stone bigger than I was when I played in my sort of professional days. So yeah, I guess I'm quite a big, I must be a tall person. You've got sort of Stephen Finn and Boyd Rankin here as well, but I guess my shape is a little bit different to them. So yeah, walking around, I do get a lot of sort of stares and attention, and I guess I get probably more attention for just being big than just a cricketer. And it's the same as sort of going on holiday to other places around the world. I seem to get sort of stared at quite a lot these days. But I guess I'm just sort of quite an unusual sort of size and physique compared to a normal person. But
I've never asked.
Again, it's all good fun.
I've never asked your dad what it was that you as a family ate, because he was quite tall, but obviously not your size. What's the secret to the size you've grown to? Not about the bodybuilding part, but just the height. What did you eat as a kid?
It's actually my mum's side that's very tall. My mum is about 5'11". My gran that passed away a few years ago, she was nearly 6 foot. And my mother's brothers are all 6'6". So her side of the family has always been very tall. We walk into pubs as a family for lunches, and we're all sort of ducked down under the pillars and stuff. And like I said, my dad's mum is actually very short. She was about, I think, 5 foot. So my dad's about 6'2", so he's still quite a tall guy, but definitely got my mum sort of side to thank for that. And my brother as well is about 6'5", 6'6". So we're certainly leading us, but it's certainly in the Tremlett genes. And I've got 2 young kids myself now who are 6 and 3, and they're comfortably the sort of biggest in their class already. So I think they're going to be quite big boys as well.
Wow, amazing. My favourite piece of commentary, I think, and this sounds a bit intrigued, sort of weird, but was when you were terrorising the Bangladeshis one day. And I just said on commentary, a giant in the land of Lilliput, when you were taking another wicket. I was quite pleased with that at the time, but you had to be there, really. So I tell you what, let's. I'd just like to go back briefly to 2010, because although you had a great career and you took 500 odd wickets and things.
Yeah.
I guess you're remembered most for the impact you had on the Ashes in Australia. And particularly, I just want to remind you of one thing that didn't go quite so well, which was when you went to Bavaria pre-tour and did all these kind of various drills, one of which was boxing.
Yeah.
Talk us through that. You boxing with Jimmy Anderson.
Yeah, no, it's funny because a few of us have been chatting about that trip this time round, because we've got Owen Morgan's here and Tim Preston's here who were on that trip to Germany. And I mean, that was one of the hardest weeks of my sort of life, really, doing that. I did a similar thing with Rod Marsh's Academy in 2001. We went to an army camp before flying to Australia. So that was another sort of testing week. But yeah, in terms of the boxing, I think initially we were meant to have Joe Calzaghe come over and sort of give us a boxing lesson and have a boxing class as part of the bit more fun, because they were sort of putting us through our paces for about 5 days. But yeah, I just remember it was a fighting sort of competition where it was meant to be sort of against sort of someone your sort of similar size and height. So I would have thought I would have been put up against Stephen Finn or Kevin Peterson or someone, but for some reason I went up against Jimmy, which wasn't really a sort of very fair fight. And it was basically just sort of hitting the hell out of each other we had face guards on and gloves and everything, but I think it was 30-second rounds, and it was basically just try and beat the hell out of each other. And like I said, I had Jimmy, and I was a bit sort of tentative at the start, and he hit me a couple of times. And I guess my natural reaction was to wallop him back, wallop him back as hard as I could. And I think I broke his rib actually. And then I actually had a fight after that against Andrew Strauss, which people don't know about. But then he actually gave me a bruised rib as well. So it wasn't probably the best idea. But certainly I remember going to Perth. Jimmy, I think, missed the first practice game, or he wasn't able to bowl in the nets because he was still sort of suffering from this sort of broken rib or cracked rib. So yeah, luckily he sort of managed to recover from that. But it probably wasn't the sort of wisest thing to do, and it was definitely an unfair matchup. Me going against Jimmy, who
Does he ever
20 kgs lighter than me.
Does he ever remind you of it if you see him, or perhaps you don't see him anymore?
I don't see him. I forget. I mean, it's one of those. It's one of those trips we just never, like we were talking about it this week with the other guys. It's just one of those things you just won't forget because it was such a tough week and something that we, were put through, which we didn't expect, and we sort of thrown in the middle of nowhere for 5 days with no phones, and we didn't know where we were going. So it was certainly uncomfortable, and obviously people will say it was the right thing to do because we ended up building a great team and going to Australia and winning. And looking back, it's one of those things that you look back and it was quite an enjoyable thing to do and a great experience. But at the time, it certainly wasn't very fun. A lot of people, did find it hard.
Yeah, I remember Strauss. I actually I wrote a diary of that tour, Andrew Strauss's diary of the year, his year of we're regaining the Ashes. And he says in it that you had this one drill, probably soon after you arrived, actually, where you're sort of dumped in the forest and you have to carry a brick in each hand, walking through the forest or jogging through the forest, and you have to hold a brick in each hand for about 4 hours or something, which sounds excruciating, and I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I think the night before there was the PCA Awards, and I think we got on a plane about 7 a.m, and we didn't have our passports. We didn't know where we were going. And funny, actually, Erin Morgan was the most drugged man I've ever seen, ever. He came straight from the PCA Awards. He didn't know what he was doing, and he sat next to me on the plane the whole way to Germany, being sick in a bag. And then we were literally thrown into the middle of the forest a few hours later. I mean, like you said, we were carrying these bricks over our heads, having to do press-ups on these bricks. You couldn't call each other by your first names. And every time you got your name wrong or someone else's name wrong, you have to do 20 press-ups. So we must have done about 300 or 400 press-ups that day on these bricks, and we held these bricks. And the bag we had weighed about 25, 30 kgs. It was absolutely horrendous. And I don't know how Owen Morgan got through that day. But he must have been so hungover because it was certainly one of the toughest days I've ever done. But to have probably 20 pints the night before as well, and being sick the whole way over on the plane, it must have been a bit of a battle. So it shows sort of how sort of mentally tough he is.
Yeah, and I was going to just ask, I mean, overall, before we get into a quick resume of the series, do you think it actually was a good thing to do? I mean, England don't do that kind of thing anymore, do they? I mean, they go off and play golf in Scotland or something. I mean, do you think that actually that is a bit of a lightweight approach? And actually, if you're going to Australia to do what is one of the toughest jobs in the game, actually that kind of experience may be a better solution or a precursor to the series?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of say whether it's right or wrong. When I look back, I think it was actually a really good thing to do because I was coming back into that side, not having played Test cricket for quite a while. And I guess I wasn't, within that environment. So, and it was quite a sort of personal environment. We had a lot of sort of personal chats around fires at night and get us to sort of open up to each other. And I certainly remember opening up about things that I haven't told people for a long time. And so I felt like I sort of bonded with guys I hadn't seen for a while, and some guys I didn't really know at all. There's guys like Craig Keyswetter there and things like that, which I never really spent any time with. I actually felt I connected with a lot of guys going into that Ashes tour, having gone through that sort of experience because it was uncomfortable. And you get to see, some of the best players in the world out of their sort of comfortable situation. I remember Kevin Peterson finding that week quite difficult because, he didn't have his phone and he was away from his family, and I think he had young kids at the time. And, it was hard for a lot of people, especially ones with people with children. They weren't able talk to their children and things like this. It was sort of made you sort of get closer together and help each other through those sort of tough times. Even some of the management had like Phil Neal, the team manager, he found it quite hard. So it was all sort of, you got to know people out of their comfort zone. So I certainly found it beneficial. I don't think people like Graham Swan and KP would have found it very beneficial. They were sort of cemented in the England side and probably didn't need to feel like they needed to do something like that. But for someone that felt like a bit of an outsider coming back in after a few years, I found I found it good, and I felt sort of connected with the guys that those sort of 2 or 3 months in Australia.
And just looking back at the series, I mean, you had a big impact, didn't you? Because I mean, I know you didn't take thousands of wickets, but you had that impact by your height and your presence and your bounce and so on. I mean, did you feel kind of that did you know that you would have that sort of impact? And how did you make the most of it?
I think certainly, again, I spent a lot of winters in Australia, even though I had a lot of injuries and sort of winters rehabbing. I spent 2 years with the Rod Marsh Academy in Australia, and then I did probably another 4 winters in Perth and Sydney, rehabbing and training and bowling. So I always felt bowling on Australian pitches, and I had a lot of it leading up to that. But and it also came a time where I just felt like my body was not letting me down. I got through a whole season at Surrey, took a lot of wicket, and bowling just sort of felt a little bit effortless, really. And it just sort of came at the right time in my career where I felt like I was bowling my best, and I hadn't played Test cricket for a while, so I almost went in with a bit of a nothing to lose sort of attitude, I guess. And when I got the opportunity to play in Perth, it was on the bounciest pitch in the world, and I managed to take a wicket, I think, in my first over. And after that, I sort of relaxed and sort of just tried to sort of trust the process of those sort of times and sessions I'd done with Rod Marsh and these guys over the years, and just tried to sort of embrace the experience, even though it sort of happened all very quickly. And unfortunately, we didn't win the first game I played in, but I certainly gained a lot of confidence because I took wickets in that Test match. And again, like Australian pitches as a tall bowler, they were just always wickets I felt very comfortable in, and I could hit my sort of natural length.
Yeah. I just sort of thinking ahead to the next Ashes and thinking back to the last couple of series, England have tended to go to Australia and have, if one practice match, that would be it, or maybe none. And you had not only your camp in Germany, but you had, I think, 3 proper matches and lots of scenario sort of practice sessions and things like that. So do you sense that, to go to Australia to achieve that sort of difficult task, you need that bit more preparation like you had than England are sort of having now?
Yeah, and what I see, the schedule is a lot more intense now, and there's a lot more cricket. So maybe it's harder to allow yourself to have that preparation with the amount of guys that sort of about cricket that guys play these days. But certainly on that tour, yeah, I think we were there 4 weeks before that tour, and as you said, we had a lot of middle practice sessions, a lot of net sessions, and a lot of games leading into that first Test match. So you felt like you had a full sort of pre-season in Australia before we went into the first Test match. All the bowlers have had a good run out, especially the sort of starting 11. They played in the first couple of warm-up games, and then even like myself, Tim Bresnan and Ajmal Rajad then played against Australia A again, which was on team in Australia. Yeah, so your first Test match and the second Test match, but behind closed doors, we were working very hard. And there was a tough schedule every day where we were in the nets and fitness training for 2 or 3 hours a day. It was like a rotation system in the background. So yeah, we were always sort of ready to go, really. But yeah, that preparation, it went really well, and we won those practice games quite easily as well. So just everyone was we knew the batsmen were, all in pretty good touch as well leading up to that series. And, Brisbane, we had a few iffy first innings, but, when Jonathan Trott and Alistair could put on 1 million runs in the second innings, we were certainly full of confidence going into from there.
I mean, I followed the whole tour actually, and my favourite memory is Melbourne Boxing Day, where England decide to field first in the cauldron of Australian cricket, the cauldron of Australian sport, Boxing Day in Melbourne, and you just lost the Perth Test, so
Yeah.
it was 1-1. Just recap that morning for us. The fact that you won the toss, decided to field. I mean, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll firstly go back to, I remember we lost the game in Perth, and having not played for a while for England, I found it very sort of the management and the captain very impressive. We literally brushed that loss under the carpet. I think we had a 10-15 minute meeting, and we just like didn't get a plan. Richard Johnson had an absolutely day out with us, and they just played better cricket, and it was forgotten about very quickly, and we moved on to Melbourne, 1-1. But it was like we hadn't lost a game. It felt like we were still very confident in that series. But moving on to Melbourne, from what I remember, it was freezing cold. It was about 10 degrees on that morning. It was a bit of a weird one because I think a few days leading up to that, you had a couple of days in the 30s. I think the forecast for the next few days was back to being 25, 28, 30s. It was a bit of a freak sort of morning of weather. The pitch looked pretty good from memory. There was a bit of a green tinge. Most bowlers want to bat first, but it was just a sense in the air that if you won the toss, like I think most times you bat first in Australia, but it was that morning in Australia, it just felt like the right thing to do was to bowl first, and we won the toss, and yeah, it just sort of felt like I was bowling for the first sort of first spell, because we actually came off I think for rain a couple of times, but it felt like I was bowling in England when it was a bit humid, but it just felt like I was bowling in England with a cook of a ball, but in front of 95,000 people, which I've never done before. But again, I think I got hit for 8 or 10 in my first over. I remember Philip Hughes cut me for 4, and I'd never heard a sort of roar like it, and it was a pretty incredible noise. And then I managed to get Shane Watson out, I think, in the second over. I just remember just trying to bowl as fast as I physically could, and I just bowled one of the best sort of balls that reared off a length, my sort of perfect delivery I could bowl, and managed to get him out, and then that sort of, I guess, set the tone, taking early wicket. And Jimmy Anderson that day was just relentless, just nicking guys off, got their sort of middle order out, got their best player out,
Mike Hussey, yeah.
Mike Hussey.
Yeah.
At the time, he was scoring loads of runs. He was the guy we couldn't get out, but we got him out fairly early. So yeah, it was just one of those sort of perfect days where you bowled them out for under 100, and Alistair Cook and Andy Strauss went out to bat, and the sun came out, and we were none down at the end of the day, and I put my feet up for 2 days, and then we went out and bowled them out again. So as cricket games go, it doesn't really get much better than that. And again, it's probably a favourite memory of mine, being able to say that you've played a Boxing Day Test match and bowled Australia out for under 100.
Yeah. And Strauss sort of describes it as if Heineken did a Test match day like that, sort of refreshing the parts other beers cannot reach. It would be that, and because you were 150 odd, not no wicket, aren't you? At the end of the day, having bowled them out for 98, amazing, really. I remember being on commentary and saying Australia 98 all out on Boxing Day, and I could hardly believe my words.
Won a game of cricket on day one, but you kind of felt like we're not really going to lose this game. If we do lose this stuff, we're really messing this up. But and then we just went out and scored. What do we get? 500 and something. But yeah, I think we all sort of felt like if we play good cricket, there's no way we're losing them. On day one.
Yeah, exactly. In our most of our lifetimes, and we got 1 or 2 older members in this club, but in most of our lifetimes, England have only won the Ashes in Australia 3 times, 71, 86, and you guys, you must be really. Does it ever sink in that that's something that Michael Atherton and Alex Stewart played in, I think, 7 Ashes series. They never won one of them, and you are in that unique group of people that have only won the Ashes once since the 1980s in Australia. It's quite special, isn't it?
I'm not that involved in cricket anymore. I have a few select things up in my sort of office or kids' toy room these days. Ashes memorabilia. I've got the stump from Melbourne. I've got the stump from Sydney. Signed by both teams, so it gives you a reminder when you do sort of look at them and think, yeah, that is pretty special. I think every Boxing Day or most Boxing Days, it might on Sky Sports of us, playing against Australia, pretty special to be involved in something like that. And I didn't play in 2005 and 2006 and 2007, but I was in Australia when England lost 5-0. I was on the one-day series after that, and obviously I was at the receiving end as well. I played in the first test match in 2013, so I also know what it's like to lose badly in Australia. And so I've been on the sort of receiving end of winning a series and losing a series, and I know how hard it is to win a series, and especially when you lose 5-0, that is it's a really tough tour to go through that, and you do feel like giving up sort of halfway through, and the last sort of those last sort of 2 or 3 test matches in 2013 were a real grind getting through that tour when you've sort of lost 3-0 and the Aussies are sort of dominating you. So so I certainly know how hard it is to win in Australia, and the feeling you get of losing 5-0, and you do really cop it from the Aussie media, the Aussie fans. They let you know about it when you're walking down the street if they spot who you are. So yeah, to have the tour like 2010 where I feel like everything went pretty much perfect. We won pretty much all the games we played, the warm-up games, and it was just great fun. So I'll always look back on that tour with a lot of joy and some really fond memories. And hopefully when my kids are 3 and 6 now, so hopefully when they're a little bit older, I can sort of and they appreciate it. Hopefully they'll be able to look at some older footage.
They'll never. I promise you, they'll never appreciate it. They'll never understand until you're probably about 70 or something. So they'll never appreciate it. But it's a nice idea.